Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Matthew Caviola.
And I'm Dr. Mahbouba Hashemi, and we're the naturopathic doctors of Conscious Human Medicine here in Santa Monica. And today we wanted to record a video for you talking about food sensitivity and gut inflammation. You know, you might have heard of the word inflammation, specifically as it relates to development of chronic disease. And so today we wanted to discuss, the origins of inflammation and how, we will get into more details on it, but 70% of your immune system starts in your gut. So it's important in terms of what you put in your mouth.
Mm-hmm. And so what we always talk about when we start talking about inflammation and food sensitivities, we always talk about the gut, as you just mentioned. The gut and the integrity of the gut is one of the most important things. So essentially, to keep it very simple, you have little cells that line the inside of your intestinal lining, right? And these guys are the barrier between, and try to keep what's you, and what's not you, not you. So essentially you have this tube that runs up and down all the way through your body, and those cells try to keep out large food proteins from getting into your bloodstream. So some foods will actually cause perforations or damage to this particular lining in your gut. And that unfortunately sets up a cascade for these large food proteins leaking from the inside of your intestines, where they're supposed to be, to the bloodstream, where they're not supposed to be. When they do that, essentially what happens is you have cells that are going around your body looking for any kinds of foreign invaders. It doesn't matter if it's a bacteria, a virus, a yeast, or a food particle. These immune cells are looking for anything foreign. And when they see these food proteins, these large food proteins, they essentially try to neutralize them. And this essentially is the beginnings or the underpinnings of inflammation. It's an immune reaction to a food protein. So essentially we want that gut, the lining of your gut to be very integral. We want it to be solid so you don't have food particles leaking into your bloodstream, and then of course the initiation of the immune response. So this is kind of the beginnings of inflammation and kind of what we talk about with our patients in terms of understanding where inflammation is coming from, and then also trying to understand specific foods that may be causing you to have a reaction.
Exactly, and kind of, keeping two things in mind. So as you were saying, Dr. Caviola, there are foods that can actually cause that permeability to increase. And if you think about a membrane that's permeable, that means things can, seep through it. So there are foods that can cause that, meaning they are going to be quote unquote attacking that gut lining, the integrity of your gut lining. But then once the gut lining has been compromised, then any food particle can exit and enter into the bloodstream, whereas before they would totally, get properly digested and absorbed and go through that whole, process. Now they're entering prematurely into the bloodstream. So now you're seeing reactions towards foods that normally you would not have. And as we talk about the food sensitivity testing, you will learn that you would not normally have reaction towards those foods. But now, because of the integrity of the gut that has been compromised, you're responding to those foods negatively as well.
Exactly, and so that is kind of what we call intestinal permeability, or enhanced intestinal permeability, or what you might have heard at this point in time of leaky gut, right? So what we do as naturopathic doctors is to run food sensitivity testing on people. So this is one company that we use, the Great Plains Laboratory. They are based out of Kansas. So we draw some blood in our office, so I mean it's a small amount of blood, and we ship your blood all the way off to Kansas. And essentially what they do is they take your blood and test it against different food antigens. This could be anything from corn to gluten to pretty much every single vegetable, or the most commonly eaten vegetables, fruits, sugars, seafood and fish, and meats and things like that as well, and eggs. So what happens is they basically will get a reaction in the machine that they use to test your blood against these different, what we call food antigens. And then essentially we eventually get a report on the back end. And we'll talk more about that during our next video, so stay tuned for that.
Yes. Absolutely. So basically what you were saying is that the test covers all the macros, all
Right.
the different
Absolutely.
categories, and also, a lot of foods within each of those,
Correct. Correct.
macro groups.
So actually the test for 93 foods as well as to something called candida. Most people at this point in time have heard of candida. If you haven't, it's a yeast, a fungus. It's an opportunistic pathogen, meaning that when the situation is right, it can grow. So what this tests for is the presence of an immune reaction to candida, meaning that your body has seen candida in the bloodstream before.
Exactly. So, a lot of times, the 5 things that we see often, if you're thinking, so can you tell me 5 inflammatory groups of foods, then they will be, just to kind of start learning about this process, think of gluten, dairy, corn, soy, and sugar as the big guns in terms of how much inflammation they can create, and we've talked about sugar and alcohol, another toxic form of sugar before. So these can be the source of the attack, but also can be, as we said, the reason why your body is having an immune response to already the compromised system. So those are some things that you can start playing around with and see how one thing that we always talk with patients, which is why we like this test and which is why we do not make blankets, prescriptive statements to people, is because of the concept of individuality, which means, something that you respond to positively or negatively does not mean it's going to be the same food that someone else will respond in the exact same way. So this is another reason why this test can be so helpful.
Yeah, it's really helpful because it can pinpoint
For
specific
you.
foods for you that you're reacting to.
Exactly.
So not Dr. Hashimi, not Dr. Caviola, but you. So it's very, very empowering to see that particular information on the test, which is a great segue. Basically next time what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a case and to kind of give you some more explanation as to looking at the result and saying, hey, this is what's good, this is what's not so good, and kind of relating it to specific reactions that you may be having, in our case, something that a particular patient had. So stay tuned for that.
Yes.
And as always, thank you very much for joining us today, spending the time. And please definitely share this video with your friends and loved ones if you found this information helpful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If you're finding it helpful, share it, please.
Yes. So thanks very much.
Thank you for listening.